I'm back.
You still have the meeting, Commissioner Sherwood?
We should have a party.
There we go.
Okay, before we start, everybody make sure you talk into your microphone so that the people online can hear us.
Awesome. Let's kick this thing off. Ms. Rodriguez, you want to kick it off?
Oh, sure.
I almost went and turned my mic off. Okay, let me just pull up my sheet here. Okay, lots of stuff going on with the finance office, starting with the foreclosure process. It has begun. We currently have 172 properties currently going within this process. Sheriff's Service went out last week to notify them. At the end of July, properties on this list will be published in the forum. October 1st is the last day to pay off the oldest debt of 3 years, and November 19th will be the annual auction. And we are happy to announce, moving on to budgets, that budgets were released to our department heads today. After some technical difficulties, we were able to get that out. We sent an email out to each department head with instructions on how to complete their budgets, as well as their deadline reminders and links. The deadline for budgets, memos, work plans, and manpower reports are due back to the finance office by June 30th. And July 24th to the 26th are our scheduled budget hearings. The full budget calendar was sent to the commission last meeting on the consent agenda and is available to anybody who wants. Our annual audit is going very well at this point and expected to be completed on time this year. That would be June 30th to ensure that we can meet our annual GFOA deadline for outstanding financial reporting award. And the auditors were in our office conducting their testing about 2 weeks ago. So it seemed to go very smooth. I believe they are on to our single audit at this point. Moving on to our election, it is quickly coming upon us. Absentee ballots have been available for a little while now. Our staffing is, I believe, complete, if not very close to, just some last minute change outs or if people withdraw. LNA testing is almost complete. We lucked out and actually started that last Thursday, and I believe that by the end of today, it should be complete. The public test is tomorrow, and so that was announced to the district party chairs. If anybody wants to come and enjoy a lovely May morning pushing ballots through, feel free. Early voting is going to run from Tuesday, June 4th to Friday from 11 to 7 p.m. each day, and then also on the Saturday, which is new for some time, I guess you can say. Saturday, June 8th from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we have 6 locations, one of those being right here in the Cass County Courthouse. Election day voting locations, so we do have 20 of those, and that, of course, is on June 11th from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I will stand for any questions. I kind of just went through everything real quick.
That's the way to do it. Any questions for our finance team?
Judges? Go ahead. Judges? And enough judges filled for?
I think that I didn't get an update right before we went, but yes, we are very close. If not, really just looking at making adjustments. So as some people are no longer able to, we will try and find replacements for them. We put out a press release actually with Catlin, I believe last week, as well as Craig, our election administrator, did an interview with one of the stations here calling for election workers. So we continue to get applications in to fill any necessary spots. But yes, it's no small task.
2024 elections, no headlines, smooth as silk.
Knock on wood.
Knock on particle board. Any other questions, Mr. Wilson?
Nothing, I was just turning on the microphone for you if you had anything more to.
All right, IT.
Now that I've spent time putting this together, I'm going to use it repeatedly, so I can just use it for the entire year. Going into our couple sections, oh, that is really rough animation on there today.
AI?
No, this is the greatest Microsoft has. Starting into our budget this year, as we're coding across, we're seeing a rough average of around 14% higher on all software renewals This is across the market we're seeing everywhere, so it's becoming difficult as we go through. We're continuing to negotiate with vendors on that where we can, as well as cut what is not appropriate. Looking at our phone system, we have received numerous quotes on this. I updated one as of an hour ago. Our low quote is currently $110,000. All of these quotes include all hardware needed, be it handsets or headsets if needed for soft phone. High quote sits around 220. Everything else above that we threw out because it was outrageous. The low quote, surprisingly enough, came in as a full cloud hosted opportunity, meaning our phones work everywhere regardless. So that would be a huge win for us because right now you have to be on our VPN to allow that. Looking at multi-factor authentication as well as some FOB for those potentially. Costs on those would be covered the first year by the state local cybersecurity grant. We're looking at $18,000 for software, which comes with $3 a head per month. The FOBs are a one-time cost. It's the standard FOB, similar to what we have given to others. This is reasoning for those that may not have a county cell phone, do not wish to use their personal, or cannot carry one, such as our jail staff that need to have a way to generate codes. One-time cost on that. The Tyler MDR solution approved at our last commission meeting. That is the third-party software that monitors our environment for us. That has been implemented and running here again, first year funded by the state local cybersecurity grant. The following years will be on the county for renewal there. The final one we have listed out is a bit of a misnomer from where it lands, but is our tax system software. We've had large amount of talks using our finance department, our tax department, our GIS and others about our existing tax software and looking at potential replacements for various reasons. On this, we've sat through numerous vendors and had quotes from every size possible. I state that literally meaning that we've had quotes down to a couple $100,000 for implementation and ongoing to a couple million in some cases, which was a thank you very much for the pens. We'll talk later. The solution we're looking at presenting here, I would allow Brandy to speak on more if there were further questions, since her department does run with it more on there, but from a technology standpoint, it has been highly vetted. Leads us to a great direction for this. And there'll be more information on that coming, I'm sure. Moving to my next one. Come on now, there we go. Breaking into our refresh. Oh, that green is horrible up there. Our refresh is currently in action. We've rolled out quite a few machines. One big change is we are rolling out Windows 11 wherever possible compared to Windows 10. Windows 10 goes end of life in October of 2025, so we're getting in front of that as fast as we can. In addition to that, we have realigned all of our policies, which I'll have more information on in the next couple slides, to align with CISA and NIST standards. Those are the National Institutions of Strategic and Technology, as well as the Center for Internet Security. So we've spent a large amount of time on that. Our average deployment now, when I started, was around a day and a half per laptop, which I don't know how you did that unless you're walking backwards. We're down to about 120 minutes. So, from department info, our ticket load maintains about 23, 24 a day. Pretty typical across, some spike up, some spike down. We are auto closing about 10% of our tickets at this point from leveraging automation to scan for keywords and things like that. When you break it down by department, HSZ and CSO are tied at 11% across the board. Our next highest there would be the State's Attorney's Office, who has had a large amount of moves and hiring and temps that take up a large amount of time. Phishing tickets, we get around 22% of our total load is coming in from phishing tickets. Many of those are quickly resolved, however, they do take time to hit. And one of our largest changes is IT itself. We have made a policy to make sure we're ticketing our own internal work, to keep track of our own internal work. We sit around 14%. So we're making work for ourselves, but we're also documenting the work we had already been doing. We did have one staffer leave us to go join to a private industry. We have interned or promoted internally to fill that role and have offered out, and someone has accepted for that starting in June here. So we will be fully staffed. We're excited to have our new coworker join us, a graduate of NDSU, as well as a member of the Minnesota Cybersecurity Guard Unit. So we're excited to have him on task. Moving to our next section, first I want to talk about those policy updates. From policy updates, every computer in our area, as well as users, have policies that are assigned to them in the background that do everything from configure how their wireless connects to how long it takes for the computer to time out and so on and so forth. The policies that we had here, we had around 159 of them in place. That was a huge amount compared to what I've seen in other areas. The team has gone through these each manually since there's no way to export these out in a cleanly readable format. And we have now gone through, combined, condensed, and realigned to current industry standards, allowing us to eliminate or consolidate 60 policies, bringing us down to 99 total. These are also aligned to the latest release from CISA, who provides with a baseline what they would like to have. So that'll be new changes coming out for us here soon. We are currently testing those. IT's been on them for a while. We're testing them out with other departments as well to make sure there's no unexpected knock-ons. But it will be minor things that users will notice, such as on the login screen, it will make you press Control-Alt-Delete before you can put your username and password in. That is an industry standard that's been in place for a while. We've never had it. One of the other ones that some people will not enjoy is no longer going to remember the last user who logged in. So when you hit there, you have to put your username in. It won't just show your picture and have just your password. Those are based upon security. Speaking of security, we have implemented the new Tyler MDR solution on all workstations and servers throughout the county, giving us 24/7, 365 observations. Over this weekend, for example, I received 7 emails from this service telling us that someone in our jail was attempting to use a VPN to access our services. We know exactly who it is. It's one of the roster employees who has a VPN on his phone because that's what they opt to do. And it looks like their traffic is coming from everywhere in the world, and we get notifications on it. Before, this is something we would not have known or we would have found later after gate. That's an example of something we don't really care about, but it shows the level of detail they are finding for when we do. We have expanded our new remote support tool countywide. This is how we support people from our desks to any machine in the county. Previously, we had been using TeamViewer for this, and it functioned. It was put in during COVID. TeamViewer has had some security-related concerns over the past couple months. We have transitioned to another tool. The performance of this is dramatically better, as well as allowing our users to respond quicker. So it's a great win for us, and the cost went down by $300 a year, so I'll take better for cheaper. We are leveraging some of the new features that Microsoft has released as part of their M365 tenant. It's a tool called Purview. Purview allows us to get a much higher level of information on what is happening on our machines automatically collected throughout the county. This takes place anywhere there's an internet connected device or a device that was offline that comes back online and ships it up. Before, unless we caught something in the act, it was very difficult for us to rebuild what had happened historically. Having this information allows us to ingest it as well as build out patterns of known good or known traffic patterns. So instead of us going, Randy's laptop is running really slow, but maybe she just needs to reboot it, we can compare that to historical numbers and go, no, it's really slow. We should see what's going on with that. And finally, from security, our staff led a response to a critical incident on our main firewalls. This was released by the company Palo Alto, the vendor, as a 10 out of 10 CVE, or critical vulnerability. The instructions being provided to other users, such as State of North Dakota, was we cannot tell you if you are compromised, but if you think you are, burn the entire thing down and rebuild it from scratch. We had multiple agencies throughout the state where they did that out of an abundance of caution, including 2 teams that were dispatched in the middle of the night to some of the collegiate levels to do that. So we're talking overtime. This was released at roughly 7:07 a.m. on Friday the 12th while Robert and I were in Boston. By 8 a.m., they had already implemented the directed patch directed by Palo Alto and made sure we were protected. We monitored that over the weekend. There was 3 other sets of instructions provided, but our quick thinking and response allowed us to not have to do that at any time. We were able to remediate all of these issues with zero downtime to Cass County, which I'm very proud of the team for. And that is without vendor support, mind you. Otherwise, we look into the future, lots of stuff going on. We have some ongoing discussions with the state of North Dakota to co-op on providing some training on artificial intelligence throughout the state, not only to county, but other municipalities that may wish for that. The thought process being if we are generating content and can host it, and after that we really don't have to do much with it besides give them access, why not give them access? That way everyone can learn as we go. We're also starting discussions with our local peers here, both on both sides of the river, to do more information sharing at that level on either security incidents or how we can also back each other up if and when an event happens. We have some great resources in our region. However, right now, if Fargo needed hands for us to go do something, there's not a system in place to do that besides showing up and say, tell us where to go. So we're looking to more solidify that and have some actual responses to be able to help out. And then myself here, I just presented over at the North Dakota IT Symposium on Wednesday. My topics discussion there was artificial intelligence. What the heck is it? I had around 94 people in the room there. Sadly, I was up against MSUM saying how their cybersecurity incident was. So, a bit of a trade-off. I would have rather gotten to that one too. And then I will be down in Florida at the same time, roughly at the end of June here, presenting to MS-ISAC, the National Association of set up there for security, as well as Michael Gregg from the state of North Dakota. We are presenting on state and local cybersecurity initiatives and how that'll work. So I'm looking forward to having that option. Never been to that conference myself. Finally, just giving us some rough numbers as we move into election season. Top sections are going to be across all state local govs from CISO.gov. Last year, we had around 148% increase in malware attacks against local governments. Ransomwares are up by about 51%. And non-malware cyber attacks, this would be things such as fake phone calls or fake emails, things like that, are roughly about 37%. Mind you, this is only state, local, federal is way higher. The rest of these numbers are based actually on us and our current rolling accurates. Over the last 30 days, we've seen around 144,000 emails coming into our system. Out of that, with all of our phish testing and things like that, the county is sitting at 1.83% phish prone. That means when we run those tests, roughly 5 to 10 people are clicking or downloading or something like that. When we started, we were 37%. We've been doing this now for 26 months. It works. So thank you to everyone and your staff for not getting super mad that you're getting them every 2 weeks. We get roughly 12 phishing attacks sent to us each day. Out of those, in the last 90 some days, we've received around 1,497 across. Only 38 of those, due to our filtering, have made it to actual inboxes, which we're working to get that number dropped down. Many of these are being blocked ahead of time. Every time you click that phishing alert button for something you think might be a phish, that's how we learn. That's how we generate these patterns. So please keep doing that. The bigger ones we've started to see, however, are our account access. Over the past 30 days, we have had 2,671 attempts at our accounts. Out of that, only 60 users have really been impacted. The reasoning for that is usually the 60 users whose names are heavily public or are widely available or have been here the longest. A great example would be this morning, Kim Hegvig sent me a text saying, I'm in court and I'm locked out. And she was locked out because someone from France tried to log in as her. And our system saw that and locked it down accordingly. That is the importance of having things like our MFA and solutions like that in place, because if they had her password and we were not blocking France, which we do not block France at the moment, they would have had access. Over the last 90 days, we've had a total user sign-in risk detections of about 40. These are users that usually are traveling or on vacation or something like that, something that's not normal. We usually get this if someone logs in Fargo, they get on a plane, they have their work phone in their pocket in Georgia, and the phone goes, hey, wait a minute, this normally doesn't happen. Each one of these requires us to go in and verify what the actual activity is. This is why having an idea of what that normal baseline is very critical. Otherwise, to us, it looks like an actual attempt. A great example would be one of our law enforcement agents who is currently on assignment elsewhere. We received a login request from the Czech Republic. And we went, well, I don't think we have any law enforcement in Czech Republic.
Not that you're aware of.
Not that we're aware of, and that was the exact answer. The user was in a training. We had to go up the chain a couple times figuring what's going on here, and eventually got a hold of them and said, oh yeah, I signed into a computer and then they took it, and it's probably over in the Czech somewhere. But otherwise, we were ready to burn that down because it looks like we're getting attacked. Endpoint alerts, that'll be our laptops and stuff here. Over the last 90 days, we've received 58 highs, 163 mediums, 1,313 lows. These are detected based upon activity information. So a low, for example, is a super spike of activity that we normally don't see. Usually it's a non-event, we have to look at it and confirm. A medium is something that looks a little bit more suspicious, such as activity of a newly downloaded file or something that looks suspicious. We get notifications on that. Highs are things which require action immediately, usually within 1 hour. This will be something of a user has plugged in a flash drive with a known issue or a downloaded file from a known nefarious source. For highs and mediums, we also get notifications from the state of North Dakota. Usually we have it resolved before they call us, but otherwise it is having more notifications across. And finally, our VPN counts. We've had 108 users log into our VPN over the last 30 days. Out of that, the total login count is 1,946, so each one of those is logged in roughly 19 times. However, we have had 287 attempts of just brute force logins, of people taking a list of emails or a generic user, admin, generic things like that, and just trying to hit it repeatedly, hoping to break through. This number has gone down dramatically as we have recently changed over how we filter. Before, when we were not blocking areas such as China, Russia, or a huge swath of the world, that number would have a couple zeros behind it. We have now locked that down to only allow 17 total countries. We did forget Canada once. You were on the list, and I was like, crap, we need to turn that on. So we did. But that number used to be dramatically higher. We are also in the process and have written our own application that as we see even traffic coming from legitimate areas, London is a great example. If we get a nuisance somebody that just keeps hitting from a data center or something, we've written our own thresholds that'll put that in a naughty list. And that naughty list will block them for up to an hour or 24 hours and so on, and then pull them off afterwards. All of which used to require us to do this manually, but we continue to try to automate as much as we can. As we go into elections, these numbers will continue to go up. Depending how the primaries go, and as we get towards November, I expect these numbers to be dramatically higher, depending how the nation is going at that point. I stand for any questions.
Mr. Henderson, thank you. Commissioner Wright?
Not a question. The young lady in the right-hand corner, now she's up on the full screen, is Melissa, who is now the executive secretary for the Water Resource Boards. And I think this is the first time she's had an opportunity to appear at this group meeting. And I thought that I should at least introduce you by her first name at this meeting.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, a couple questions. The last one you touched on is, I think, the most important. For some of us that weren't around during our last election, could you discuss the actual elevation during, when we had, I guess maybe a better way to say it, when we had our equipment operational, what folks are trying to do, please?
We saw an increase of traffic attempts across the board of anywhere between 400 and around 4,000%. The reason behind that was largely from areas such as the People's Republic of China, North Korea, Russia, etc., that was then just hammering every local government they can see in an attempt to get in. Don't know what they're after with us, considering all of our election gear is offline and has no internet connectivity anyways. However, they're still trying to get in. That's why it's very important as we go through here to make sure we are leveraging strong security, because all it takes is for one person to get compromised, and if they have access within the system, they can transit across from there. But we see this every election cycle. Presidentials obviously are much higher, but to be frank, since 2020 and 2016, it's a lot worse than it used to be.
Thank you, sir. Next thing, when Commissioner Capitan and I were out in Bismarck, we had a briefing, not a briefing, but the auditor came and talked to us, and Ms. Rodriguez is probably aware of this. There's been a dialogue, and I don't think it's feasible to sharing it, dialogue regarding unification of our tax software, right? So he said right now there's 14 different systems, I think it's 14 or 16, whatever, more, bigger than a bread box, number of them being utilized statewide. I don't see how that's, I understand the principle of it, right? So we unify everything, cost would go way down, but I'm not entirely sure if that's feasible. And he agreed, by the way, but I think there may be something in the legislature, at least in passing, if nothing else, talking about unification of tax software. Maybe Mr. Henderson or Mr. Rodriguez, could you touch on that real quick for me, please?
I can touch on the non-IT aspect of it.
One big thing that we have to keep in mind is a large amount of our other smaller counties throughout North Dakota have been leveraging a piece of software from a single vendor. That vendor announced that they will be going out of business and will not supporting anyone at the end of 2026, I believe. We are not impacted by that. However, as these counties have poked their head out and started to look at other third parties, they've realized the actual cost of doing business when you aren't using the same product you've used for the last 35 years. As such, there's been some negative feedback saying, we can't afford to keep doing what we've been doing, state help us out. I know the association has been looking as well, and it's a difficult lift. So I would guess that is where this is coming from, and if we do a statewide mandate purchase, then we know for a fact you're supported. My biggest worry would be, as with any other statewide purchase, the right people need to be at the table to scope that out, because the needs of Cass County versus the needs of Slope County are dramatically different. And if it's not all considered, we're gonna be right back in 2 years saying this doesn't work for us.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Henderson? Mr. Greenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob and I met last Friday and had kind of a preview of the budget. And to your point about software for the property tax, the vendor we use locally here does 4 or 5 counties. And we had some discussion on that. So I'm intrigued by not to say the state's going to solve all our problems, but when you look at the overall budget that Bob's coming with, and then, we could be easily close to $1 million in software. And so I also asked to come in at their prioritization. So what are the highest priorities 2025, and then what can be looked into 2026, not knowing what the overall budget constraints are and where we're at with revenue. I just think that's something everybody should be aware of. I work for a $12 billion company, and some of the things that Bob has shared is more restrictive than for me to get in to my system that jeopardizes the grid. And so how do you evaluate the risk of upgrading, which I think we have to stay current, but it's a matter of what are the resources available, what makes sense, because he's the expert. It makes my eyes gloss over to some degree, but just
To be very blunt, I completely agree. Hearing that we are more difficult to get into than grid worries me as a private consumer. So, it's what it is.
Excellent. Commissioner Sherling?
So when you start talking about state software, I just remember spaces,
It's still there.
social services. And
never
I mean,
gone away.
there were people across the street that were telling me we're ready to throw our computers out the window.
They'll still say.
I mean, it was just, and it permeated every level of everything they did. It just affected their cup of coffee in the morning till the time they left the building. I mean, it was just awful. So, and it never got better. I mean, I heard about spaces the first day I walked in here, and it never got better.
I believe that the state could find a solution that works for it if we have the proper people at the table, similar to what we have in our state's attorney's office with Justware or Odyssey or other tools. It is leveraging our voice here in Cass County to be at that table. My worry is if we're not invited, we can't force our way in. So I'm curious to see how that goes.
Considering we're talking about property tax software in particular, maybe I can also suggest that when the initial software that some of the counties were using that was going to be no longer, I know that the Association of Counties did offer up an engagement with some solutions, but by all means, it was not a mandatory one for all of the counties. So hearing that is a little bit of news for us, especially considering we've actually been working really hard as far as our property tax committee for the county goes at looking at new solutions, and we have been investigating a number of them. The majority of the counties in North Dakota do use Tyler Solutions, and we have engaged with them, and their solution would not work for us. It's somewhat antiquated. It would pretty much put us back years. Our current solution has some challenges with it, and so we've been engaging in other areas that no other county does have. So we are so unique. I would definitely want to have a seat at that table if that was a direction that the state is looking at going towards.
And like I said, the auditor's belief is that it's not feasible, but that doesn't necessarily mean the legislature won't appropriate and fund it and create it, right? So, this one is.
the legislature doesn't necessarily agree with the auditor.
Any further questions for Mr. Henderson? All right, recorder.
To date, we have recorded 800 more documents so far this year than this time last year, so we're heading up in the right direction. We're going to continue to hold on hiring for our vacant clerk position until those submissions get higher yet. For the upcoming primary election, we will be securing the ballots and then preparing them for storage at record keepers for the 22-month retention period. We continue to work on long-term projects as we have time. On the consent agenda for today's commission meeting, Andrin is asking for the commission to approve a contract by Fiddler Technologies to begin work on a property fraud alert application. The recorders felt it would be most cost-effective and efficient to have a fraud guard product for the entire state, minus 3 counties. The goal is to get this in place by 2025, and that's why we're asking for a little early approval to get started on some of that preliminary work. Of course, subject to budget approval for the Andrin budget. In mid-June, I'll be attending the North Dakota Recorders Conference to be held in Dickinson this year. I will stand for any questions.
Any questions for recorder? All right. Taxes.
Thank you. Yeah, I just plan to go over a couple things with everybody here today, just with the upcoming Board of Equalization. I always feel it's a good time to just kind of prep everybody on what we're kind of seeing on the table and what happened with valuations between last year and this year. Oh, I guess I didn't share my screen. I'm sorry. Let me get this up here. Okay, so, of course, you're not going to be able to see it very well, but this is the annual report I put together every year. This will all be in the packet coming up in that June 3rd meeting. We just kind of hit on some of the high notes. Valuations are up as a county, 5.9%, taking everything together. We're going to be at $1,344,000,000 value. So the value of the mill is going to be $1,344,000. So it's unbelievable to look at from when I started here even to where we are now. I think it's doubled almost, or I'll kind of show part of the report.
Commissioner Sherling and I were at $485,000 12 years ago.
Wow. Yeah. It's just, it's amazing how fast everything's just gone up and the new growth we're seeing year over year.
1.3 what?
So the value of a mill is $1,344,000.
134.
Yep. We plan on it landing there. There's always, it's kind of a moving target until central assessments are certified in July. And there's always random adjustments that happen through the year where somebody filed for a new home exemption late or something like that, that they move around the values a little bit. That's, over the years, I've been usually within probably a quarter or 1/10% usually with these estimates. So valuation of a house went up to $330,000 this year on average. That's rolling in Fargo, West Fargo, and all the rural stuff. Still working on some of this information I'm putting out, but I do have the building permit values. This will kind of play into what Deb was talking about from last year. Recordings were down a lot. You can see new building permits for residential was way down, about 20%, went from 607 to 487. Commercial, though, surprisingly, was still pretty decent. It's down a lot from 2022, but if you take the jump from 2021 to 2022, it went from 81 permits to 193, and then now it's at 158. I think that's going to be a consistent level we see for a while. Same with the new homes. I think we're going to be around that 480 pretty consistently, especially with Cassidy getting a new subdivision of 200 parcels. Horace continue to grow. Mapleton will probably spark some more growth, and there's talks of cities like Argusville and some of those areas even expanding on what they have. So kind of moving on down the line with that, our sales ratio, we landed within tolerance on commercial, and we were at 89.7% on residential. Again, I realize it's hard to see, so I apologize. But once we did all our new valuations and adjustments, residential moved up to about 94%, and commercial moved up to about 98%. I'm all right being a little higher on commercial. The reason for that is the way the state of North Dakota works, you have to submit at least 30 sales to count for your sales ratio. If you don't do that, you have to go back a year, and we have to use every single sale from that year. If you don't hit 30 by that year, you have to go back another year. We're using 3 years, so we're behind kind of 3 years on what we're using for all our activity. So we got stuff from 2021 that's still showing up on our sales ratio. So it makes sense to kind of be on that higher side on the commercial for that. We still have to be within a 90 to 100% range. And if you align all our sales, you're going to see those older ones from 2021. We're probably over the 100% mark, but some of the newer ones, it's just the nature of the beast. Unless you're a city like Fargo, West Fargo and Bismarck might hit 30, but that's about it. It's pretty rare to hit 30 on the commercial for most other places. And then the rest of this is just some information I just kind of put together. I'll be sending it out shortly. If there's anything you guys ever want, or if there's something you want to see, I can put the data in here and visualize it for you, so it shouldn't be a problem.
Oh, excuse me.
Yep.
You have like a 5-year, you said 5.9% increase in value?
Yeah, let me.
What's the 5 years, you have that?
Let me go over that with you. So if we back up a little bit, and I was trying to play around to do the single page on this for some reason. Taylor and I were looking at this here, and I was having issues with my computer, so I do apologize. I can't pull this up more. Okay, so let's go to our taxable valuation over the years. So this is our 10-year valuation history that I provide here. I break it down to the area we handle, which excludes Fargo and West Fargo, and then I include the areas of Fargo and West Fargo in there as well. So we're looking at the left screen here. Going back 5 years, 2020, on the rural cast was 163 million. If you go back the whole county together, we were at 976,800,000. So
You have like percent year to year?
yep, so it went up 5.9% in 2020, it went up 5.9% in 2021, went up 9.7% in 2022, 11.8% in 2023, and then 5.9% this year. So, yeah, 2 pretty heavy years in 2022 and 2023, which obviously was kind of with the low interest rates and all that. Apologize. Do you have a question?
Well, yeah, I was just wondering, do you feel like you're keeping up with the rural stuff? That's when we hear complaints, is you haven't been around for a while, and then
Yeah.
people are upset. My house doubled in value. Well, you got a deal the last 5 years.
I can say they're upset.
They never quite understand that.
Yeah, well, they're upset if we haven't been around in a while, and then whenever you're out there, I think there's some people upset too. But the biggest part here from 2016 when I started was just, we got to get all this data on property record cards. And that took a lot. And we did that. We accomplished that over the years. So now, over the past 2 years, we've been on our reappraisal cycle. We have the whole county split up in about 6 years worth of reassessments. So we're just kind of getting back into all that. And I think it shouldn't be a problem getting back to each area 6 years. Caston's the city we're doing this year. And I think they're already kind of like, weren't you guys just out here? But if you look back, that was 2017 was the last time. So there was a little bit of lag because trying to push all that new data in and just getting property record cards up to date. But now that we have this cycle set up, we should absolutely be able to accommodate that.
And we're still using that firm.
Vanguard.
Yeah.
Yep, we use their software. So early on in probably about 2016, 17, they did some reappraisals on their own. But we handle all that in office now, and we prefer it that way. They house the software, but we house all the data, and we put together basically all the appraisals every year on every property now.
Okay, so they're not going out at all.
No, we do on unique commercial projects. We do allocate some money to utilize them on a yearly basis. I'll probably have them go do the North Dakota soybean plant this year, just to get the value. It's exempt for 15 years, but we still want to have that valuation. I've picked up all the values on it up to this year, but since it's done, I'll probably just have them go through that process. So, but we do feel we are keeping up with the rural values, but it's just always tough. on any of those townships. And I've said it year after year, you get a rural site, 5 to 10 acres, whatever it is. Nobody's listing stuff out in those rural areas. When they do, I feel like they can just name a price that feels right to them. And a lot of times, you know, even though they're going fishing, someone bites, and just because they want that piece of land. So it is tough to keep up with those. But I think there's a lot more awareness with what we've put out to the website, things like that, that people are more aware of what their value might have been versus what they had been in the past. So I think that's helped a lot too.
Things will probably settle a bit too when the diversion's finished.
I don't know if they'll settle
Well, I
at
mean,
all.
but as to valuable property versus not as valuable. You
Oh,
know, I mean,
just if you're
right
within
now
the
it's-
protected area
yeah.
versus not being.
Yeah,
I guess I
the
don't.
Western Cass Flood Project, I mean, I think that enters into it too. I mean,
Yeah.
who's sitting high and who's not.
Yeah, I'll be interested on the people that are paying, you know, thousands of dollars in flood insurance, how that plays out in the market and how that's looked at by realtors and through sales and stuff. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah.
But as for the rural stuff that we handle, I don't anticipate too much change in that. It'll probably just be continually growing. I think there'll be more people wanting to move out to those rural areas. So, but yeah, that's our report. I'll be going over that in more detail, obviously, in a couple weeks here. But I did want to show you some enhancements to our website we did too. So you might be familiar with this. Hope everybody's looked at it here. This is where we house all our data. Catlin's looking at this. Hope he's got a smile on his face. We're using the secondary Cass County color that he sent us. So we're following that kind of color palette that we put together. But we have the residential sales app. Showed this to you guys numerous times. This is a GIS-based interactive map that we worked with Kay and her team with. So we have links to that, so you can just go research all the sales, just kind of filter it by date, type of house, all that information. And then one thing that we did add is I've always wanted to include West Fargo on our landing page, just so people, if they're there, they can go right to West Fargo. Robert, do you mind if I use your address? What's your address? Or just the house address should be fine.
1107?
1107. Okay. Oh. All right. So it's not going to have your name, but it's 36th Avenue?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you have the parcel number, it'll bring up, now it just takes you to their landing page instead. So it's just a easier way to let people that are, I think we get a lot of people that are on the website trying to pull up Fargo and West Fargo stuff. Since we're the county, we host all the tax information. Unfortunately, we don't have all the parcel information, but now we are able to at least include West Fargo. We can't do Fargo, obviously, because they don't have Vanguard. I've tried to reach out on that, but it is nice that we were able to add this. So with that, though, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
So GIS is incredibly valuable for a lot of us that do drawings for a living. As I'm looking at Mr. Henderson, what would it take to actually unify all of these things? Is it Herculean effort, or is it just not possible? Or somewhere in
There's
between?
a technical answer and a political answer to that. From a technical standpoint, nothing. That is what it's designed to do. We would have to allow each other to have access to the data sets and decide how we want to, as a group, represent it. From the political standpoint, however, it's who owns what data, where does it reside in the fiefdom, effectively. The West Fargo data, for example, using Vanguard is very easy to pull out. Fargo using their own assessment software is much more difficult. If they were to provide us, for example, access to pull from it and generate reports, we could probably write some middleware to make this on their behalf. That's not our place. So it's just getting us all to play well in the playground.
And I
At
should
the end
mention the state is working on their state, hosting all the parcel data at the state level, I know too. So we do send that, I think, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Yeah, the data's not the problem.
Yeah.
Who's doing the state level?
Well, Bob Nooch and what's their,
Bob Nooch and his 2 people he has fully allocated, so I expect they'll be done in 2035.
that's what I was
GIS.
trying to, North Dakota GIS, yeah.
Yeah, they are drastically understaffed over there, and they leverage, honestly, their highest draw is to pay a vendor to do it, because they don't have the staff to do it.
And I guess before I wrap up, just to kind of give an update, we've been a pretty quiet year for appeals. There are going to be a few things that come up at the county board. Sterling Properties, who manages the Goldmark portfolio for apartments, they're going to have about 20 apartment appeals. There is going to be one it's kind of unique, and I'm still looking into how we have to weigh in on this. It's requesting an exemption on North Dakota Autism Center, and it's one of those on paper. It's like 100% they should get it, but there's a weird way they went about, I think, getting the loan or the financing, and there's a situation where a for-profit portion of their company is, I haven't looked at everything, but they were denied at the city level by their attorney's advice because of that. So they're coming to the county. I have reached out to our state's attorney's office, and they did agree with the decision made by West Fargo's attorney, just because there's the two different parts of the business, and both have to be nonprofit, but there's one that's for-profit, one that's nonprofit.
Is that the building on 13th?
That's correct. So the use of the property, 100%. Yeah, the use of the property is 100% would qualify, but there's just kind of I think it just needs to be looked at legislatively, or if it can, something the state board can weigh in on, I guess they could do that as well.
So we did that building for free, actually. We donated all of our fees. I personally did that.
Oh, okay.
So I know what you're talking about intimately. Commissioner Brightman.
I read something in the paper this morning about Epic Properties. Are you having any difficulty with them?
I haven't had difficulty in the areas I deal with. They're more directly in Fargo and West Fargo. I guess I haven't had too much on the rural side that I work with. I think they'll be working their way down to Horace on a couple properties, but not a whole lot as of yet. Haven't had any issues, I should say. And then the last thing that I will go over, there were some issues with, I guess, some of the changes and adjustments made at the local level that I'll bring up. I'm going to use it more as a training session for some of our local assessors. Just making adjustments that don't really fall suit with what Century Code allows. And we're trying to get away from that older system. This is why we put more education in place. And honestly, as a county and as our taxpayers, we invested heavily in software to make sure we're calibrated equitably throughout the county, and we need to continue to enforce that. So anybody that's going to make changes, they need to be aware you have to meet with our office and at least enter the information so we can price it out in our software. So,
Mr. Wilson.
Just to put a finer point on that, would that be a board more or less making a subjective change to a property value rather than something that doesn't meet the criteria that is established and should be followed?
yeah, it was a lot of I thinks and just kind of putting what the insurance price was for a value, or putting what the person said it cost to build, things like that. So we can't have that, and we're not going to. So,
Commissioner Schilling.
Thanks. So I have a question. I don't know where I should bring it up, but I'm going to start right now.
okay.
Because it might go to you and maybe our state's attorney. But is there anything we can do about dangerous properties in the state, I mean, in the county, that end up in our lap and we have to remediate as asbestos? For example, how many old schools are sitting out there in Cass County
Oh,
right now?
yeah, there's a fair amount between the schools and the churches that are
And-
kind of just left vacant.
And you know, the churches aren't so bad, but the schools are big and old and super dangerous. I mean, with the asbestos in the basement, gym floors falling in and all that. And so the school district sells it to somebody online. Or, you know, I mean, and this has happened a couple of times. And in the end, it's the county taxpayers that end up, you know, having to remediate this for no small amount of money. So, I mean, and it ultimately is the school district's responsibility. They're the ones that should be destroying their buildings if they can't, you know. I
Yeah.
think that they should be financially responsible for these buildings instead of just, you know, selling them for $1 and then the taxes aren't paid. And Brandy's got herself an old building that we have to take care of.
There's a lot of issues that play into that. One, well, first, my staff, we're just not trained to understand or to acknowledge if there's asbestos or things like that, or
There is.
we can have a pretty good idea, but I mean, we just wouldn't be able to make the call on when it should be deemed hazardous or not, or when it meets that criteria. Unfortunately, a lot of the townships don't always have, or cities even, I don't know what they use for a building inspector. But I think it'd be having a good building inspector that can go in there and look into those things would be super helpful.
Well, I wonder if, I mean, could we pass an ordinance that you'd have to have a health inspection on a building before it was, you could, record a deed? I don't know, I'm just throwing out some thoughts, because this is really expensive.
I think you can look to Argosville, I just went through up there, right? So it does take some time. I do think we get there. I think the pickle becomes, as you implied, it's when the district or the whoever sells this thing, this widget to another person for $1, and then that remains. And again, Argosville is the perfect exemplary answer to that, because I got a tour of that building prior to our election, and then Montplaisir and I went up there, I can't remember how many times, more than a couple times, just to go by it and see if this thing is anything that it could this thing become a thing? And unfortunately, we were hoping it would become a project or a facility or a site, and it became a $500,000 bill that we had to take care of. Luckily, they had assets. I'm not entirely sure you could have any sort of a regulation or a limit regarding, call it health or whatever, because any building older than 1970 probably has asbestos in it to one degree or another, whether it's, the worry is the friable stuff, so pipe insulation and things like that. But if you see an 8-inch by 8-inch tile, that 8-inch by 8-inch tile has asbestos in it 90% of the time. And guaranteed the glue, the mastic, that also has asbestos in it. And a lot of houses have that in it right now. If you went around to the older parts of town in the basement, that 8x8 vinyl tile is asbestos with asbestos glue. So I think that kind of is what it is sometimes, but I understand what you're going for, Mr. Anderson.
Only speaking from the same side, when I was over at Lake Park, we built a new school, sold off one to a developer, et cetera, and the town had the same discussion of, can we put a ordinance or something in place? And it was determined through their legal counsel that no, because then you'd have to apply that to all of the houses, and 80% of your houses were hit too.
Everything that flips. Ms. Madriga.
To add on to that, a lot of these schoolhouses seem to be in cities, and it really is the city ordinances that would be applicable in these cases. And I don't even know if Cass County would have the jurisdiction to necessarily do it. Unfortunately, with Argosville, the city did try to go through the dangerous building and condemn it, and instructed them to demolish it, but the owners just didn't react to it, and the city didn't take any further action, and it ended up by default in our area. But yeah, there's a lot of responsibility along the way before it gets to us.
Well, I mean, Hunter, it's just like, oh, here, Brandy, this is your building. I mean, that's what they were indicating,
And only
is that Cass County owns the Hunter School, and I'm like, well, good for us.
and only because they stopped paying their taxes.
Right.
Otherwise, it would remain whoever's, and it would remain dangerous.
I would just, if there's anything that anybody can think of that we could be a little proactive in trying to make sure that the school districts are responsible for those buildings, not the county taxpayers, because I maintain that school districts have a little more leeway than we do. Yes, well.
Oh, Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Sherling, just for the sake of if anybody looks back on these minutes at some point, I think our state's attorney's office has thoroughly looked into the Hunter example that you've brought in, and would vigorously argue that we do not own the Hunter schoolhouse. So there certainly have been instances in the past that have been challenging, and there may be some to come in the future that are challenging as well. But I just wanted to make a point that from everything that I'm hearing from our state attorney's office, and I think it has been, this particular example's been vetted through equalization, finance, state's attorney, that there is no position that I have heard of that asserts ownership to Cass County at this point. Just want to make that clear.
But it could have easily gone the other way had there not been a couple of missing signatures on a deed.
Absolutely,
Ms.
absolutely.
Ms. Madriga.
So it's not technically Cass County's property yet. I will just put yet. It will be on the foreclosure process. We just, because they went through a contract for deed the initial time. And the messy paperwork, basically the deed wasn't filed or wasn't recorded, which means that once the contract for deed was satisfied, we were not able to give the owners their property because they didn't have any proof of ownership. So lots of messy details in the Hunter property.
Commissioner Capitan.
Do we have a number of buildings like this, like the Argosville School or in the county, that are empty and probably end up in our?
I would recommend just taking a drive through. Many of them are maintained and set up there, but otherwise, it may look nice from the outside, but get inside, you've got water, you've got asbestos, you've got subfloorings collapsing. It's sadly a typical thing of many rural areas right now.
Just about every little town's got an old school.
An old school or an old general store or an old post office or an old something that's been sitting. I mean, I remember growing up in Fertile and it was the old Jim's Jungle, and you'd break in there to go to see what's inside of it. And hopefully I don't have mesothelioma now from that.
Fingers crossed. All right, Water Resource District, finally, welcome. Are you water resourcing in your district?
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners, and thank you, Commissioner Breitling, for the warm welcome and introduction. Just wanted to give you guys an update on some of our activities, and I'll plan to attend these going forward pretty regularly as well, just to keep you informed of what we're up to here. We have a lot of new staff. As you know, Carol has retired after 40 years, so I was her assistant, so now I've gone on to be the director of the Water Resource Districts. We also have a new treasurer, Lele, and a new assistant as well. So please bear with us as we try to learn everything. It's kind of a little bit of a steep learning curve for us, so we're doing our best, but thank you so much for your patience as we learn all these things. Some activities, just generally, our 2023 audits are almost complete. I know the Southeast Cass audit will be a component unit for the Cass County audit, as there's a lot of diversion activity and funds going through Southeast Cass, so they're large enough to be that component unit. So we're working with the state auditor's office on ours, and then with the county auditors as well. Also, we're working on our budgeting for 2025. Just a note that we also levy for the Red River Joint Board, and the Red River Joint Board has a lot of regional benefits and benefits to Cass County and Cass County residents, stream gauge funding, and on all season weather gauges, which will really help for spring flood predictions. Bunch of other tools, LIDAR tools, and cost share funding for various projects in the county and in the region. So we are happy to be a part of that board as well. Other general kind of activities in our districts, Cass County Joint District, as I'm sure you're all aware of, is still working on property rights acquisition for the FM diversion project. And then we also have the Sheldon Addition project that we are pretty close to bidding that one as well. Our Southeast Cass board is dealing with a lot of development along our drains. So we have some reconstruction projects, slide repair projects, working with developers to make sure we have the right property rights for our drains to keep them maintained and in good working order. Also, you guys are probably all aware we've done our reassessments on several of our drains and facilities in the Southeast Cass District. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions on those reassessments if you have any, but generally the purpose of those is just to make sure that as development occurs, we can update not only the property values, but also the boundaries of our districts, and also to make sure that everybody's just paying the fair share. So normally if you're a developed property, if you just built your house, you're not included at the developed rate unless we go through a reassessment. So especially in areas like Horace, West Fargo, South Fargo, where there's a ton of development ongoing, we do these reassessments every few years just to make sure we keep everything fair for all the residents in the district. Maple River District, they have their Davenport project that most of you should be familiar with now, the Davenport levee. We're just finishing some permits and right away before we kick that one off. And several of our drain reconstruction projects in that district. Rush River District has an RCPP project through the NRCS in the city of Amenia, that Amenia Ring levee that you're probably familiar with as well. So we're working on that. In our North Cass district, smaller district, so not as much going on, the just general drain maintenance projects, and just they're looking at how to afford bigger channel reconstruction projects in the future, being their construction is so expensive right now, and just making sure they can still afford to keep all the drains in good working order. So that is my report. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything.
All right, any questions? Commissioner Sherling?
I would just add, thanks, Melissa. I just add that the Amenia and Davenport, for example, are being partially funded by our county flood sales taxes. So I'm happy to be able to contribute to those in addition to the big metro project.
Yeah, thank you so much. We're very grateful for the flood sales tax participation in those projects. They're also very worthwhile, and our county will help a lot of our county residents as well.
All right, any further questions for Water Resource? All right, well, welcome to your new job. Thanks for being here. Appreciate your time, and obviously this takes place every now and then, so keeping us up to speed is incredibly important, especially when it comes to budget time. So a lot of us haven't heard whatever drain number, whatever drain activity for the first time once a year.
Mm-hmm.
So more is more, not less is more. Thank you for your time today.
Yep, thank you.
Mr. Wilson.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I've got a number of things that I'm going to run through, so please feel free to stop me, interrupt, ask questions as I'm moving through. Obviously, the county administrator position at this point is doubling as a co-executive director on the Diversion Authority project. I think I've had a number of conversations with those of you who are on the Diversion Authority board, understand the role, and Mr. Redlinger, city administrator from Fargo, we're I think getting into a rhythm very, very well on that. There's a level of effort required there, obviously, but thanks to the general counsel, the diversion chair, and the project management group, Jacobs, that is assisting greatly in that the role is and the workload is manageable and certainly moving forward. So it's there, but has become much more of a rhythm after got through the first, I'd say couple of weeks of getting into the transition. We are, as a county, also in collaboration with our local partners, very quickly moving into construction phase of a 911 dispatch center through the RRDC partnership. This one is a little bit unique as of due to the fact that when the facility is completed, the authority will own the facility and will operate it as its own entity. Through the construction period, Cass County will own the project. So there's some nuances there and some unique responsibility all laid out through the Joint Powers Agreement among the member entities that make up the RRDC. I'll have more information during the commission agenda this afternoon with a little briefing and more detailed review of what some of those construction activities and responsibilities will be, but wanted to mention it very quickly. The role with the North Dakota Association of Counties and representative to National Association of Counties continues to be a really interesting role for me, and I think it's valuable to be at those conversations. Recently at the Western Interstate Region Conference for NACO, there are more issues at that particular conference that are much more impactful, I would say, of our some of our western counties, but it's also an opportunity for the NACO Board of Directors to meet. Good refresher that the finances of NACO are very strong, even as they're going through a reorganization process and rebuilding sort of their financial model and the revenue generation activities that they have transitioned away from and transitioned into over the past 4 or 5 years. They and there several times have referenced the North Dakota model as very similar to what they looked at emulating and have really built on. At the conference a couple of weeks ago, had a number of conversations with the executive director that I need to follow up on regarding AI, deployment of AI, and some follow-up conversations on guidelines and regulations on ARPA reporting. And those continue to be a little bit of a moving target as far as clarifications and reporting requirements. So that having that ability to have those direct conversations and points of contact, I think, are very valuable. At the last North Dakota Association of Counties meeting a few weeks ago, Mr. Becker addressed the group, and a good part of that address was the proposed constitutional amendment that is gathering signatures right now. It was a good realization for me that if that gets the number of signatures, regardless of somebody's position on the initiative, as an association, as a county, we will really need to be in high gear on being attuned to what are the legislative needs that would have to be accounted for and be on top of those going into the session. Because there were a number of conversations there that just said that this would require legislative action, So I think it's, while drawing that very clear distinction between advocating and informing, we need to very clearly need to inform ourselves and then work with the association to make sure we're aware of the needs that will potentially come out of that. So I thought that was, for me, that was a very helpful conversation to be part of. Just end of last week, and I've not had a chance to share this with department head group. We will do that at our next department head meeting coming up next week. Is the Upper Midwest CPI number that we base the COLA recommendation to the commission on, that is basically the starting point for COLA number within the budget. That was released last week, and that came back at 2.5%. So that is oftentimes that is the beginning of the conversation that the department heads will have on what the recommendation is. It's not something that we've been able to follow every year recently, but I was happy to see that we were back in what I would call much more normal range than we had been in for a couple of years. And it's, I expect a good discussion, but just wanted to share that with the group that was released last week. And obviously that's something that the department head group will take up when we look at next week. Jumping into at our next meeting, 2 weeks from today, there will be a building committee meeting prior to this commission meeting. And a couple of things that we do plan to talk about at the building committee, and I wanted to just share with this group so there's an awareness, is obviously you directed the administration office to work with local architect, Foss Architect, to prepare plan designs for a courtroom in the current location of the IT office. And so I met with Mr. Skolblick with Foss and Judge Webb, and Ms. Peters was in that meeting last week. And so I think those plans are coming along nicely. There was some conversation about sight lines, and if you're in this position, seeing there around just the courtroom, let's say logistics, as well as if corridors in and out of the courtroom, and then whether or not you connect that courtroom by door to an adjacent conference room or not. So I think we will plan to have a briefing of that those plans are well into the developmental phase at the meeting on the 3rd. Another element of that is I've had a number of conversations with Mr. Henderson, and any obviously a relocation of IT from current location to future permanent location would most likely, all scenarios I'm aware of, require a temporary location. And I believe we have located a suitable combination of temporary locations where the IT department could be located, split between the old commission chambers, first floor of the courthouse, former coroner's office up on the second floor of the courthouse, and then the former county social services administration office up on the 4th floor of the annex building. So those are some temporary spots that could be utilized and would serve the department's needs as during some kind of a transition phase. And the related to that, the potential permanent locations, future permanent locations of the IT office. Really, there are two options that I would say are coming into the most focus at this point. And one would be locating in the area of what is the former juvenile secure detention location on the 1st floor of the annex building. That area has been unutilized as long as I've been with Cass County. I joined the county in March of 2017. I think it was moved, no longer utilized for about a year prior to that. Just the design of it, I don't think it meets guidelines and best practices and recommendations of how you work with youth offenders at this point. So that is in many views obsolete and could be a future location for permanent IT location. Alternative view would be that you really take a different approach and really start with the 1st floor of the annex building as a blank slate and look at it of, what are the highest volume offices within human services in terms of interaction with general public foot traffic, and bring those down to the 1st floor of the annex so they are most efficiently accessible for members of the public. That in large part vacates second, maybe part of 3rd floor annex, and then move potentially IT parts of state's attorney over to 2nd floor of annex. Again, that would be an area where with that move would potentially clear out 2nd floor areas in the courthouse that could open up the discussion for conversations with the legislature next year if there were going to be some partnership in funding additional courtrooms. That hasn't been a practice in the past, but is a possibility that could get some real attention, and that also just becomes a more dynamic conversation, because then obviously you've got other offices that would move around and be reflected in that conversation as well. So, looking forward to the commission having understanding the different perspectives there, and giving some feedback, because it's a very interesting look forward. We know we're going to have some space considerations that need to be looked at moving forward, and it's so I think we've got two very viable options, but just need to really have some feedback one way or another. And I would certainly stand by for any comments, any questions on that at this point, or wait for discussion in 2 weeks. Without any comment on that, I just got two other quick points I was going to.
Negatives.
Oh, yeah. A couple of you were involved in a conversation with our health benefits consultant, Brown & Brown, last week, really looking at potential future design changes for our health plan. I think this is a really important conversation. Very much appreciate the feedback that we got last week, and we're in the midst of trying to schedule future conversations, because this is an ongoing discussion, and something we really need to needs to have a close review, because we fund our health insurance with a trust fund. Deficit spending that trust fund over the last number of years. We rightfully so take a great deal of pride in the health benefits that we offer to our employees, and want to continue to do that. But we also have to make sure that the plan is structured so that it's viable, and we continue to have the right income to support the level of expenditures there, and not negatively impact employees and dependents and insured individuals on those plans. So that conversation continues. And then the last thing that I would just mention as something that I have heard and would be interested in more feedback. This is a suggestion from our finance director, Ms. Madriga, a month or so ago, that I've chatted with a couple of you about. Is, as you know, we have a agreement with the state of North Dakota for maintenance and administration of the Brewer Lake camping area. And it is something that obviously we've put a lot of effort into over the last, I think, decade, more than that, and probably take a certain amount of pride in seeing that used as a recreational resource. But it's a state of North Dakota property. It is it's a pretty significant amount of effort to continue to provide that service, and I think the question of is that the right continued use of resources when it's not property that we own, but we obviously take an interest in providing recreational opportunities for our constituents. So do we want to continue in that contractual engagement? So that's just something, again, that I mentioned for if any of you want to provide input to me after the fact, and if there's a future conversation to have, we can do that. But I wanted to mention that as I've had the conversation with a couple of you, and I appreciate the extra time to run a little bit long. That concludes my report. If there are no follow-up questions.
Any questions for Mr. Wilson? All right, HR or anything?
No, I'm good.
Perfect. Okay, let's adjourn. Thanks everyone for your time today. Department heads, you're awesome. Love you guys. Back together in 10.